here.
Thanks, pal. There we go.
Yeah, two, please.
Thank you.
Just to your left, please.
Just to your left, please.
Sorry, sure. Excuse me, guys. Please get one with the tray. Do you need a big dish? I don't know if I can hold both of them.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. All right, there we go.
Yeah, both.
You know, it's
Yeah, the other hand. How about the other hand? If you're right-handed.
Both up.
Both up.
oh, both
Like that.
Like this.
Oh, like this. Okay.
Yeah. So 1 inch, so it's quite square.
Oh, cool, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good.
Yeah, there you go.
This way, please.
Right in the middle. There we go.
A little bit.
Okay.
Straight to me now. Stay with me. More smiles though.
That's it, right, man. Just work around on the line.
I'll start from here and work around.
It's
Okay.
easier. Watch it. That's it.
Okay.
Stay with me once more. Thank you.
Just keep coming around. Yeah. There we go.
Let me see.
All the way down to the left again, please.
Hold on. That's me. Champagne.
And over here to me, please.
Yep. Let me show it.
And can you just do one just with the prize?
Yeah.
That's all right.
It's going to disappear here, so should I hold it up like this?
That's great.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, stay with me. That's great.
Marlon, just to your right a second as well, please. And one over here, over here a second.
Mm-hmm.
And just this way, please.
And just guys again. Marlon, back to me.
And
Just to your right, Marlon, please.
You just pivot slightly. That's
Oh, like this?
That's it. That's it. That's great.
just to your left again, Marlon.
One here, please.
Just
Alright,
just over here, please. Thank you.
Just find a few pieces, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Marlon, just
Thank you.
Marlon, just to your right, please.
Oh,
Sorry, thank you.
yeah. Oh, down here?
Just
Okay.
bring it.
The lock or...
That's great. Stay there. Do one of the champagne, please.
Want the champagne?
Really? Champagne?
I think it's
Really?
really? The prize. It's not the Grand Prix.
Just that. And now I see. More smiles. Perfect.
And fantastic. Marlon, just to your right, please.
Oh.
Cheers.
Thanks very much.
Great, thank you guys.
It's hard to actually this winning stuff. It's not so easy. Congratulations.
Here's what it is. Here's what it is. I trust it.
Ooh, champagne is that kind of night.
Hey, pass it.
Champagne?
Open this.
That's not
I'm going to behave myself and start with water.
okay.
Actually, who make it import a champagne?
Yeah, probably should have been champagne. You could have water and champagne. It's not exclusive. Okay. James is going to say something, I think. Are you?
There you go. I will. I am Fiametta Rocco. I normally run the Man Booker International Prize, but since Ion Trewin died in March, I've been running the meeting of all the judges, and today was our last meeting. Michael Wood was the chair, and we had a sort of complicated conversation at some different points in this process. Not today. Today was an easy day. Hasn't always been the case. Today, 2015, was an easy day. Thank you. That's over to you, Michael.
Okay. It couldn't have been easier in a way. I mean, excuse me, this is not quite the appropriate.
It's not quite full enough.
Not quite the appropriate mode.
It's not a comment.
Yeah.
Amount.
Yeah, the amounts and the posture probably not quite right. No, this. There were some terrific books on this list, not just the short list, but the long list and the longer list. There were books that we all became deeply fond of. And so it's a kind of wrench to, I mean, this business of choosing a prize, once it's enormously exciting, and it arrives at a terrifically exciting moment like tonight. But along the way, you have to keep letting go of books you really like, and books you really admire. And that letting go is also part of the kind of qualitative thing. If you didn't care about the ones you let go, you wouldn't care quite so much about the ones you keep. So there's a kind of sense of you won through the sheer quality of your books, but through a kind of loyalty in readers who felt, look, I can let this go, but I can't let that go. In the end, nobody could let you go. So that was how
I have a way of doing that.
That was how it was. Yeah.
So at the beginning of the meeting today, every single one of the judges came, and Michael started a discussion about the books, and the conversation was very similar. Each judge said, I have a winner, I have one, maybe two other books that I would support if that were the thing. And it turned out that the I have a winner for all five of them was the same book.
I only have a wow.
Yeah, and we weren't wrong.
I'm usually more articulate than that.
Yeah.
Yes.
We asked, you're the first Jamaican winner of this
Mhm.
prize, and you were very kind to mention your father earlier, but I wondered what you feel like being the first Jamaican to take this prize.
I don't know. It's because like Jamaica has a really rich literary tradition. It is kind of surreal being the first. I really hope I'm not the last, and I don't think I will be, because there is just this sort of real universe of sort of really spunky creativity that's happening, and to me, first just means that the first one that gets some attention. I think there's a lot more coming, and I hope it brings more attention to us coming out of Jamaica and the Caribbean, because I think there's some brand new voices coming out. We're exploring contemporary society. We're exploring what's beyond politics, what's beyond colonialism. We're looking at queer issues and so on, comics, humor. And I hope that there's a greater lens turned towards that.
You've had a difficult time yourself in Jamaica.
How's it, sorry?
You've had a difficult time in Jamaica yourself.
Mhm.
You said that you could not have written this if you were still living there.
Mhm.
Can you explain the process of departing your home country and writing a book from in exile?
Sure. I do think it's a novel of exile. I do think that, I was very careful to almost restrict it to the Jamaica that I experienced personally. I wouldn't write a novel about 2010 because I wasn't there. And which is not to say it can't be done, but that was not the story I wanted to tell. But I also think being that close to it in the country where I was would have robbed me of a certain perspective, and maybe even robbed me of a certain courage to go into topics like violence and the aftermath of violence and sexuality and just sort of even being more even-handed with sometimes even terrible characters or good characters. And I think I needed that distance, and I needed that perspective. And for me, and I can only speak for myself, I needed that sense of maybe there wouldn't be consequences directly, even if it would never happen. I think I needed that sense of freedom to really show a lens on what I wanted to talk about. Yes.
Good evening. Congratulations on your award.
Thank you.
What I wanted to ask you particularly, if you'd known in advance that you were going to win the award, which character would you have had deliver your acceptance speech?
Which character would have what?
Which character from Seven Trillions would you have had deliver your acceptance speech?
Oh my God, I love that question so much.
Great question.
You see, I couldn't be mean, because she'd be too sarcastic.
It's a great question.
And I couldn't have Alex Pierce, because the funny thing about Alex Pierce is that he's actually a bad writer. You know what? There's a character in it called Tristan Phillips. And Tristan Phillips, he appears, he's in Rikers. And he's a prisoner, but he has a soul of a poet. And he's based on so many men who are exactly like Bob Marley in the 70s, who even had musical talent, but just couldn't transcend whatever it was that held them back or drew them into crime. For every one Bob Marley that made it out, there are 100 Tristan Phillips who didn't. That doesn't mean he can't carry an interview. It doesn't mean he's loquacious. It doesn't mean he can't own a camera. And it probably would have been him. He also, even though he appears near the end of the book, he talks about Jamaica from way back as 1956. So he's one of the few characters who knows the entire sort of post-colonial independence, gang violence, drug culture, Jamaicans in foreign. He's the one character that does all of that. So he'd be the person.
You said from the podium you were very close to giving up about 10 years ago.
Mhm.
How close were you? And now looking back on that, when the name was read out, how did it feel even sweeter?
It did feel really sweet, and I really wanted to get that out back then when I sort of gave up on writing and gave up on the idea that people wanted to hear these stories. And it is kind of affirming, especially, this is the riskiest novel I've ever written, and not just in terms of subject matter, but in terms of form. And I'd be happy with 2 people liking it. So it's really affirming, and when you're in that sort of quiet room writing novels, you like to think the world isn't there, but that's actually the absolute opposite is true. The world is never more there than when you're in that room, because it's all one of the things to think about is expectations, like what should a writer write, what novel should I write. And this is the first novel, and I like all the stuff I've written before, but this is the first novel where I got rid of the word should. That I wasn't going to sort of cater to what I think a novel should be, especially since my idea for what a novel should be is Silas Marner. So, so I had to let go of that.
And which was the novel that got rejected 70 times? Was it your second novel?
It was my first, John Crow's Devil. I didn't even recognize that person. Yes?
Am I right that you don't like adverbs?
How what?
That you don't like adverbs?
I don't like.
Don't remark about adverbs.
God, I knew this was gonna haunt me. I'm waiting for the one reader who says they found an adverb in that novel, because I'm pretty sure there isn't any. I even had a crisis. And like all crises, I took it to Facebook, and I said, "Help! I hate adverbs, but one of my characters wants to use one." And everybody was like, "You must respect the character," and so on. And I put it in, and I'm like, "No, I can't do it. I can't do it." Listen. This is the last thing I said to my students who asked when can I use adverbs. I said, it's very simple. Become Alan Hollinghurst. Then you can use any adverb you want, because he is such a master of it. It's like Nabokov with an adjective. But with what I find with my jeremiad about adverbs begins here, is that too often instead of it's funny that they're called modifiers, because instead of making a sentence clearer, they make it more vague. You know, the big muscular horse ran quickly will never be better than the stallion galloped. But we'll ran quickly, and instead of making the sentence clear, it sort of muddied it. And
How about arguably my favourite?
what's funny is in my and I'm being slightly maybe hypocritical, maybe contradictory, because I love adverbs in my nonfiction. And if I'm writing reviews, I will like his performance was frighteningly obscure. So I just think sometimes for me there is a resonance in the actuality of a scene that modifiers, literary devices, metaphors, all of which I love, can sometimes ruin. I tell my students all the time, a sunset doesn't need your help. Just describe it. It really doesn't need your help. You know, yeah. It's like yeah.
What kept you writing?
What kept me writing? One thing that kept me writing was, the main thing that kept me writing was a sense of discovery about the novel. I had no idea where this novel was going to go. That's not true. I had a very specific idea of where this novel was going to go, and I was dead wrong. I read The Savage Detectives by Paul Bolaño, and I really thought this novel was going to spend the entire time circling around the assassination attempt and just go from viewer to viewer, and added different shades to it as we talk about the event, and I got so bored with that. And a part of it was a huge. Then I ended up in a situation where I started to think, well, where is it going? Again, because my previous novel still adhered to a very classic idea of what a novel is. It follows an arc, there's a climax, there's a resolution, there's catastrophe, and so on. And this novel was the first where I, instead of thinking in terms of story, I thought in terms of character and how do characters do with their lives and how do their lives go on. It's something funny enough, I think I first saw in like Alice Munro. Like Alice Munro's short story doesn't end when you think it's going to end. She goes on, and there are consequences. Mm-hmm. And this was the first novel where that took over from plot. And it's funny because I'm a big plotter. I'm a big believer in plots. I draw plot charts. But this was the first where I sort of kind of took a backseat and trying to find out the many ways in which these characters mess up their own lives. Because humans are really good at that. And that was, funny enough, in a weird way, part of the fun. Yes, in front.
It's a non-literary question, but what are you going to spend the prize money on?
What am I going to spend the prize money on? Let's see, I can go to Jeeves and Hawks tomorrow. Finally get my Oswald Boateng suit.
Not a handbag like a previous winner.
Yeah, like a Prada or something. I don't know. I have no idea. I'm really tempted to go to. There's so many great rare bookstores here, and I cannot be allowed to let loose in a rare bookstore. Because I see something like James Joyce in hardcover and go, how much is that? $400? Here's money. So I should do the sensible thing and put it in a bank account.
No, that would not.
Oh, come on.
No.
All right, fine.
That would not be the sensible thing.
Fine, I'm going to find who has all of every William Faulkner novel in hardcover, and I'll buy every single one.
There you go.
Yes.
Question for Mr. Wood.
Yeah.
What is the criteria that you use to determine who actually gets the prize? You said you love it before.
It's a great question. It's a great question. The simple answer is we had no predetermined criteria. That is, no criteria in advance of reading the books. And then we read the books and we tried to listen to the books and see what sort of criteria they produced. And tried to listen to what each book was trying to do and decide how well each book did it. So the book sort of taught us how to read. And at that point, you can begin to compare. And at that point, you begin to really think, this book, I like this book, but it's got there are a whole set of criteria you can use. Like, I like this book, there's a lot wrong with this book, but it's so good, I don't care what's wrong with it. Or this book has got certain defects which really sort of get in the way. It's a very nice book, works well, but it's not really quite in this competition. And then there's something like a kind of thing today, particularly we were thinking about which of these books do we think A is just relentlessly exciting and interesting, it doesn't give up, and secondly, which books will we be reading 10 years from now? And there are really good books, I mean excellent books, that don't quite meet that second criterion. Although, of course, we could be wrong. How do we know what people are going to be reading 10 years from now? But there's still a feeling. It's still a feeling you can have. It's that was part of it.
Just one other, what did you actually learn from 7 Killings?
I learned that you could, I guess I learned, that we'd all learned different things. I learned that that in terms of the writing, I learned that you can always start again. And nearly every chapter was a new start. I didn't quite know I was going to narrate the next chapter, and I was always surprised. I didn't know what the voice would sound like. I didn't know where they would be standing in relation to the material. I didn't know where the angle of vision was, and I love the fact I didn't know. And then I think I really liked the transfer to America, and the fact that this story about Jamaica, and it's not just about Jamaica. It's about drugs. It's about what you do about drugs. It's about how what you do about drugs sometimes makes the drug situation worse, although you supposedly want to make it better. There's a whole series. We're living the situation. It's mainly now on the Mexican border and in the United States. We're living the same situation. It's not 1973. We're living a situation where what do you do about these things? So I learned. I mean, some that I knew, but I just learned more about how difficult that stuff is. That makes sense to you.
There's been a lot of talk about how often the major prizes overlook genre fiction, especially crime fiction. And I think you said you set out to write a crime novel, and obviously a very literary one. But do you see this victory as, in a way, as sort of a major victory for genre, for crime fiction?
I hope people look at it that way. It's because man, I mean, a lot of the guiding novels for this that I was reading are crime novels. I'm hugely indebted to James Ellroy, Patricia Highsmith, because I'm also, I'm dealing with morally complicated people who do morally complicated things, and they're hugely, sort of indebted to that. But it's I don't know. It's I think. The certainly a lot of the Booker winners that have become really special to me in a lot of ways. The Famish Road is a fantasy novel. It's certainly a magical realist one. But I'm hugely indebted to crime fiction, and not just because I was writing criminals, and the story is told mostly by drug dealers, gunmen, hitmen, and one poor woman who gets caught in the middle of all of it. But I think I hope that we see that there are so many great voices coming from all these genres, and I'm hugely inspired by them, and I've never had and I don't believe in that sort of superior attitude to genre fiction. I'm not even crazy about the term genre fiction, but certainly I was hugely inspired by it. You had a question?
So, go ahead.
Sorry, I hope this isn't a bit flippant, but are you a bit nervous about meeting Keith Richards, who's the best candidate?
I'm trying to think if Keith Richards or Mick Jagger comes off worse. I would love to ask Mick Jagger if he knew there was a kidnapping plot hatched against him. I don't know if he knew about it. So it'd be funny if this is the way he finds out. It would be. It'd be hilarious. Because they really did. They really were planning to kidnap him and hold him for ransom for $2 million. I think Keith Richards would love it. Keith Richards lived in Jamaica for so long. There's a story about Keith Richards coming back to Jamaica, and Peter Tosh is living in his house. And Keith Richards said, "I'm coming back, get out of my house." And Peter Tosh, who's a stepping razor, said, "If you come here, I'm going to kill you." And then Keith Richards said, "You mean with the gun that I taught you how to shoot? Get out of my house." So, so he's pretty hardcore. so that McAllister people are gonna see it. I'm so grateful to that school. They hired me. I didn't have a terminal degree. They hired me for 1 year, and 1 year turned into 8. And they leave me alone to do what I want. I taught a class on the 9/11 novel. They leave me alone to have a class called Self as Character. So they give me a lot of leeway and a lot of space, and those kids are pretty amazing. I don't know, but bound books look nice. I'm not above looking on a shelf and go, I wrote that. And now it's in Italian. I can't read Italian, but I wrote that. Yes.
In America, you're published by one of the biggest publishers in the world. In the UK, you're published by one of the smallest. What's big the difference?
Are they small?
I
don't know.
Nay.
One World is pretty big. Sorry, well, give me the question again. Sorry.
So in America, you're published by Penguin Random House.
Mhm.
In the UK, you're published by One World, one of the...
Exclusive, selective.
So big in America,
Yeah.
small in the UK. I just wonder what's the difference between...
You know, it's funny because ultimately, the thing is, I'm not necessarily published by Penguin. I'm published by a subsidiary of Penguin, and yes, ultimately it's part of the Penguin Random House group. But one thing I think One World and Riverhead have in common is they do run themselves like a boutique press, and I think they're really driven first and foremost by falling in love with that book and championing that book. The type of writers are on the Riverhead roster very similar to the type of writers that are on the One World roster, and ultimately it's who champions your book. You can be with a big publisher and be lost. And I actually realized that from my first novel with Akashic, and Akashic is an even smaller press. And I realized that I'd rather a publisher that got behind the book. I'd rather a publisher where the book never goes out of print. There's some very, very famous writers, some of in this room, who don't even know that their books are out of print. And I had to learn that actually, because I kind of drank the Kool-Aid as well. I'm like, where's my $2 million advance? And when is the Nobel coming? Next week? And when is Oprah gonna call? And I had to sort of certainly readjust. What you realize is, big or small, you want a publisher that's in your corner, especially when you're going to tell a risky story. Half of this book is told in a patois. So, I need people in my corner. So, and I think that's ultimately really what matters. That's what they both, I think, have in common. Yep.
I'm not sure, but I've heard that the option for the film has been taken up by
It's by HBO.
By HBO.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were involved in the process to...
I'm involved to an extent, but if I told you, I'd have to kill you. But I'm involved to a very, very big extent. We have a script already. We have a director who's very interested, and everybody's very excited.
We're all dead.
Is what? Well, the first good one, yeah.
I have one last question.
Yes,
Mark.
you have a question.
So this is just as a fan of the movie, The Outlaw Josie Wells.
Mm-hmm.
One of the great movies. So I want to know how he came to be your name.
We've been talking about this,
Well,
this
also
morning.
because-
Michael was
Yeah.
This is a
morning.
Clint Eastwood movie called
Well-
The Outlaw Josie Wells, and of which Orson Welles said, if anybody else had made it, it would have been a classic.
He's right. I still think it's Clint Eastwood's best movie.
Yeah.
I think there are at least, who is it? Josie Wells, some character. There are at least two characters in the novel who go on about Clint Eastwood, both Cowboy Clint Eastwood and Dirty Harry Clint Eastwood. Yeah. And so much of Jamaican gun culture was shaped by cowboys. Every house had Marty Robbins cowboy ballads, including mine. Every Jamaican knows the lyrics to every Kenny Rogers song, even if we'll never admit it. But before, but the archetype of the Jamaican outlaw. If you see The Harder They Come, even the poster is him, you know, like that. Goes through the sort of archetype of the modern, funny enough, the modern gangster.
Yeah.
Came from this
From Italian movies.
from Italian movies,
Yeah.
from Italian movies, you know, an Italian interpretation of the Wild West. It's just, you know, it's all the spaces. The man with no name is a speak quiet and carry a big gun, and Jamaicans, particularly in West Kingston, were really just enraptured by that. They would go and a lot of the stuff that's in that book about that is actually true. They would go and give things a gun salute and shoot the screen when Clint Eastwood. But yeah, it's I knew, even before I knew it was Joe's Wills, I knew he had to have not just a cowboy name, but a film cowboy name.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. This is very
Thank you.
good. Thank you.
Thank you guys
Thank
for coming.
you. Thank you all very,
you all for
very
being here.
Mm-hmm.
That was cool. Great answer.
Okay.
What are we doing now? Yeah.
Do I need?
Yeah, we're going to do the podcast.